Alright guys, so now we're going to start to get into template syntax, and we're going to look at things like directives like ngFor to loop through stuff, ngIf to have conditionals within our HTML templates. It's basically adding logic to our output, to our view, which is something that regular HTML does not have, and that's why Angular has often been described as what HTML would have been if it was created for dynamic web apps and not just static websites. So in this video I want to basically just have an array of users and then loop through that array of users and output them into our template. Okay, so later on I'll show you how we can integrate the users and the user component, but for now we're just going to work in the users component. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create a property. So this is the users.component.ts file, and we're going to have a property called users. Now this is actually going to use the user interface that we created, okay, that we have here in models user.ts, except it's going to be an array of users, so we just want to add on the brackets. Now we have this error here because it doesn't know what user is yet, so we have to bring it in. So we're going to say import user, and it's going to be from /models/user. Okay, so now that red line's gone, and we want to define our users inside of ng on init. Okay, so we'll get rid of that, and we're just going to say this dot users and set that to an array. Okay, so this will be an array of user objects, and what I'm going to do is go to the user component TS file that we created and just grab this one user, so everything in these brackets, and this is where the bracket colorizer extension comes in handy. You can clearly see where this object starts and ends and not get confused with like the address braces or the ng on init braces. So we'll go ahead and copy that. We'll go back to our users component and paste that in the array. Alright, now we're going to have a couple users, so I'm going to put a comma, paste one more. So we'll have 3 users. Let's edit the second one here. We'll say Kevin Johnson, and we'll say he's 34. And we'll just go ahead and make up an address here. We'll say 20 School Street. Say Lynn, Mass, and then this user, let's make this Karen Williams, and we'll say she's 26. Address, we'll say 55. We'll say 55 Mill Street. And let's say she's from Miami, Florida. Okay, so now we have an array of users. So let's go ahead and save this, and then let's see what happens if we go into our users component HTML, which displays right here. Get rid of this paragraph, and let's just put in some string interpolation and try to put not this, just users, and save. So this is just giving us 3 objects, okay, because that's what each user is. It's an object, so we need a way to loop through these objects, or loop through this array and output the object. So for that we're going to use ngFor. So I'm going to put in an h2, and we'll just say users, and then we'll put in let's do a ul, and then an li. Now the li is what I want to use to attach the ngFor directive to, because for each object, for each user, I want to output an li. So in ng directive, it's basically like an attribute. Now we need to use an asterisk before it because it's what's called a structural directive. Okay, ngIf, ngFor, ngSwitch, anything that has to do with the structure and the control of the output has this star in front of it, or this asterisk. So we're going to say ngFor like that, and we want to say let, which defines a variable, so let user of users. So basically this users it pertains to this users here, so this array, and we're basically saying for each one we want a variable called user. So now inside this li we can put in our double curly braces and we can say user dot and then whatever property we want. So let's say first name and save. And there we go. So now we're outputting the first name of each user that we have in this array. Now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of steal the template from our user component HTML, which we created, which has the h2 and then the ul with the rest of the info. So I'm going to grab that and put that inside of our users inside the li here. So we'll paste that in. I'm just going to change the h2 to an h3 like that and save. And now you can see we're outputting all of our users. And I'm just going to make this smaller again. Now we can manipulate this users array. So let's say we wanted to create another method called add user. And let's say this takes in a user and we'll give it a type of our user interface. And then down here we can just say this dot users dot push. Okay, push just adds on to an array. It's just a JavaScript method for arrays, and then we'll pass in the user. And then what we could do is we haven't gotten to like events yet or anything like that to add through a form, but let's just go into the ng on init under where we created the array and just call this dot add user, and then we can pass in a new user. So I'm just going to copy this here, this object, and paste that in, and then we'll change this up. We'll say David Jackson say 12 Wake Street, Miami, Florida. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And you can see now David Jackson has been added. All right, so in the next video, I want to look at ngIf, which is another structural directive, and it's used for conditionals. So basically having if statements inside of your template. So we'll get into that next.